Hello, and welcome to Being Human. On this episode of the podcast, I sat down with Upgrade James. James is a health researcher and coach. His work centres around Ray Peat's approach to health. What I love about James's work is that in a world of dogmatic approach to health and particularly nutrition, James really focuses on deep principles and really focuses on the mechanisms behind the protocols that he quote-unquote prescribes. We talked a whole load about metabolic health, everything from how to use stimulants such as nicotine and caffeine properly, to optimal carbohydrate sources, digestive health, hormones. James also shared his personal journey through health, one that is as inspiring as it is arduous. He really has gone through the journey himself, and I think that's what makes him such a brilliant researcher, such a dedicated coach. Like I said, he really puts an emphasis on getting things right, understanding things on a deep mechanistic level, and that really came across in this conversation. I really appreciate all the knowledge he shared. You will find a ton of value in it, so make sure to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below, share it around on social media, and hit that subscribe button too. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to hit that follow button and rate the show 5 stars. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting Being Human. The Being Human podcast is brought to you by Raw Royal Jelly. Royal Jelly is a magical substance. The founder of Raw Royal Jelly, Magnus, told me this story himself. He said, queen bees are not born any differently to any other bee. What makes them grow into a queen bee is this stuff right here, Royal Jelly. Royal Jelly is basically honey on steroids. What colostrum is to milk, Royal Jelly is to honey. This stuff has powerful properties. It can help you with everything from growing taller to avoiding learned helplessness. The main thing I noticed when taking this was that I just felt a general uptick in all-round happiness. All I do is, first thing in the morning, I literally dip my finger in there, and that is my Royal Jelly consumption for the day. Really recommend you try it out, and if you would like to try Raw Royal Jellies, then head over to rawroyaljelly.com and use the code AARON11 to get 11% off your order. That's ARUN, all caps, 11 to get 11% off your order. The Being Human podcast is brought to you by Mr. Bassett's. Mr. Bassett's brings you all the natural goods you need, everything from this beautiful Italian coffee here to get you caffeinated to help you crush your day, to cosmetics such as this tallow balm right here. This tallow balm is my favourite cosmetic product. I put it on my skin, on my face, or put it on my hair. It really takes care of your skin, helps provide it with the nutrients, the vitamin E that it needs, instead of just basically killing it with a load of chemicals like other cosmetics do. They of course do grappler's soap as well, which is a really good natural soap, helps you keep those skin infections at bay if you're on the mats, especially in these summer months. All you need to do to pick up goods such as these is to head over to mrbassetts.com and use the code WAG10 to get 10% off your order. That's mrbassetts.com, WAG, all caps, 10 to get 10% off your order. And now presenting Being Human with Upgrade James. Yeah, so I suppose a good place to start would be to, obviously you've already told me a bit about it, but to go back to the start of your health journey, how you got onto the path with health that you are now, like the space that you are with health, that you're in with health, and how you came to where you are.
So to go right back to the beginning, around like the age of 16, I had a big growth spurt, and I was like, kind of got stretched out, was skinny, a little bit self-conscious, and I got into the gym and I started like overeating. I was trying to put on as much size as possible, and I was eating like the standard bro diet, like chicken, broccoli, loads of protein, eggs, all low quality meats, and really not taking any care for my metabolism. And coming from quite a youthful, healthy state, things started to go downhill pretty quickly. I noticed that my sort of general outlook was kind of dissipating. My mood was poor, and then over time, like my routine had changed. I stopped socializing as much, and I was just super concentrated on getting as big as possible. And I got to a point where I was just like, I don't know, like swollen and like estrogenic, but I was strong, and I had like a lot of weight behind
the traditional
me.
swole.
Exactly.
That's what swole is, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just like
big for the sake of being big, but not necessarily vital.
Not vital at all. And I mean, so that kind of went on until I was about 19, and I kind of, the whole lifestyle that revolves around that as well. Like, you stop going out as much and you start kind of focusing more on just how you're going to get in the right amount of protein each day, and you kind of obsess over these things and it becomes a bit orthorexic. And then I got to a point where I was just had all this like inflammation. I just wasn't healthy. I started to notice my hair was falling out, and I did like what any sort of normie would do and just type in like hair loss drugs. And so around the age of 19, I then like purchased this Sol Palmetto, which is like a herbal extract that was recommended through just some search that I did on how to resolve hair loss or start thickening up the hair. And yeah, Sol Palmetto is like a mild version of finasteride. It's like a herbal extract.
Okay. And
it blocks DHT. And so if you know anything about DHT, it's like this crucial hormone, especially in your developmental years, like so especially when you're like the ages of 18 to like 25. But it's crucial throughout your whole life, right? And you're blocking that at such an important stage of your life, of a young man's life. It had like catastrophic effects on me. Now this doesn't always happen, doesn't always like apply across the board, but I think I was already in a state of ill health, and then this was just like adding to that. And anyway, so my health then kind of went even more downhill, and not knowing that was like a catalyst in that process, I then went to the more potent form, which was finasteride, a pharmaceutical. And then, yeah, my health just completely crashed, and that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I had all sorts from like no libido, couldn't put on muscle in the gym anymore, like my sleep went, so I was like an insomniac all of a sudden, a chronic state of anxiety, loads of like panic attacks, and also coming from this state of where I've never experienced anything like that in my life. Like I was up until like 16, 17, I was really healthy, and yeah, all of a sudden I couldn't even socialize properly. And this is how crucial DHT is, and blocking it doesn't always affect people in the same way, but I think across the board it is so like, it's like ignorance of physiology to block it as a man. And anyway, so that was the beginning of the health journey, and from there I just tried various different things, and things continued to trend downwards, and eventually I found like Ray Peat's work, and I managed to dig myself out of that hole. And yeah, it was I look back now and I think it all happened for a reason, because I landed on this information, and I find it's so important. And then as a result, I started to set up the page and started sharing some of the content, and yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned, or it's interesting to hear you talk about the fact that when you're experiencing all of these deleterious effects from, you know, taking these 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, the DHT blockers essentially, that it's not just, you know, things like low libido, it's not being able to socialise. This is something like I've been talking about with a lot of guests on the podcast recently, and something I've been delving into a lot. Your testosterone, and especially your DHT, it's not just the physical effects that it has on us, it's the mental and quite frankly spiritual effects. But people don't realise it really makes you who you are as a man. Like your DHT, it's your propensity to take risk, it's your ability to logically think, to problem solve, all of these quote unquote, it's going to sound really red pill, but masculine traits. The physical mechanism, or the physical base for a lot of these, is having, you know, a solid endocrinological system in terms of testosterone. But DHT is like 10 times more potent than testosterone. Blocking that for the sake of, and don't get me wrong, like it's easy to say when you've got a full head of hair, or for the sake of like trying to keep your hair, like I think hopefully all of us as men understand like how difficult, especially at a young age, how difficult it can be to start losing your hair. Like it's a big identity thing, right? It's not comfortable, it's not nice, but people really need to, this is something that I think really needs to work its way into the mainstream. People need to understand like blocking your DHT for the sake of that is not okay, and like you're not going to come out unscathed. Somebody that does it, like they must just be so sure with them. The DHT, you know what I mean, must be like Khabib and Magomedov DHT levels.
Well, I do think a lot of the people that don't experience these like crashes, because it basically, there's a term for it, it's called post-finasteride syndrome. I only took it for 7 days, and like my health just like hit the fan.
That quickly?
Yeah. So it's important to recognize like the Solpol Meto is a milder version, and I think that set the stage, and then finasteride was like the straw that broke the camel's back. So I took Solpol Meto for a few months, but I was kind of just mindlessly taking it and hoping my hair would kind of thicken up, and it never really did anything, and nor did finasteride. Obviously I didn't stay the course, but I couldn't, because I got hit with this like horrendous shitstorm of like symptoms. Excuse my language.
And however it comes on this podcast.
And so I think people, like men that don't really notice the effects, they must be in such a poor state of health that like dropping that crucial hormone, it may already be rock bottom anyway, we don't know, and dropping it even more with something like finasteride, like nuking it, if they don't feel that, there's something very fundamentally wrong. And it's important to recognize people that are losing that, like men that are losing their hair in the 20s, something is off, they are not healthy to begin with. So taking something like finasteride on top of that, like when you're in a chronic state of health, like even the worst insult, you might not even notice it, because you're so kind of consumed by like a low metabolic state or whatever. And it's one of the things with like finasteride is, or like any of these DHT blockers, is it plays a crucial role in just like functions like you mentioned that go far beyond just like I don't know, libido. So it's things like liver function, bile flow, cognitive function. It's needed to produce like allopregnanolone or these neurosteroids that actually make you feel stable. It's important for GABA production. It's important for dopamine production. And all these things are what make a man like calm and collected and motivated. And it also has like really important effects on like the physicality of a man. So it makes you nice and strong and lean and like powerful. Like your power output is through the roof when you've got high DHT. And these things, blocking that enzyme that converts testosterone into DHT, which is what these DHT blockers do essentially, is just causing a cascade of like issues that kind of need to be undone. Otherwise you're going to be locked into a state of just low vitality. And that was my journey. That was then finding out, how can I resolve this position that I've got myself in, and how can I unwind like the damage.
What were the first protocols that you started delving into when you discovered Ray Peat's work?
So my perspective changed on like post finasteride, because the biggest thing for me was like recognizing that it was just a byproduct of a damaged metabolism. And so focusing on any one condition or symptom, I think kind of leads you astray from the truth when it comes to health. And this is like bioenergetics and this pro-metabolic view of health. I think if you just fundamentally look at the root cause of health issues or the root cause of disease as an energy issue, then you really can't go wrong. So getting hyper focused on just like a condition or a symptom will just have you spinning your wheels. And so that realization was the biggest thing for me, and that's what I took from Ray Peat's work initially. It's like the fundamental driver of health is energy, and restoring that energy production is what will lead to like holistic health and resolution of these strange issues. And so when I first got into his work, it was kind of just implementing some of the more basic things, the nutritional things. But I was coming from a background of carnivore, so maybe I'll touch on like the journey from having the issues with finasteride and then to Ray Peat's work. And so after having these health issues, I didn't really do much to resolve them personally, because I didn't think it was in my control to do that, because you're kind of taught, you're brought up in this society where you think like you should externalize your health to doctors or professionals. And that was my mindset. So I was going back and forth to the doctors like, listen, I'm having all these bizarre symptoms. I've got awful anxiety. I've got no libido. I don't feel like a man. I can't socialize. I can't make eye contact with people. I'm losing muscle. I'm gaining fat. I was like growing like something called gynecomastia, where you like grow breast tissue as a man. And I was like, what's going on? Like, and they said, oh, you're just stressed. We'll do some blood tests and everything. And my testosterone was rock bottom when they did the blood test. But they said, oh, it's nothing related to the finasteride.
It's insane, isn't it? It's insane.
I was like, they were saying, oh, your hormones are pretty, like my cholesterol shot up as well, which is a sign of like low metabolism. And they said, oh, we might have to look at some cholesterol lowering compounds, and then maybe put you on an SSRI, like an antidepressant. Like, I said, I'm not depressed. I've got my body's failing me, and I'm desperate. I don't need an SSRI.
So like even before you like knew the health protocols, before you delved into it, like you intuitively knew, like this isn't like just like some mental health concern. Like there's a physical problem here.
Yeah, well,
you could relate the physical to the mental.
Yeah, I actually couldn't at first. So I externalized a lot of my problems. I thought, I'm anxious because of my current situation in life, and I kind of went through different schools of thought. I even went to therapy at one point, and like nothing would work. I tried meditation, I tried all sorts, and I came to the realization that it was as a result of taking these 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, sulpalmeta and finasteride, through just doing research. So I eventually was like, I'm just looking for answers, and then I realized that there was like thousands of men who experienced something similar. And then like that was a light bulb moment, and that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I realized I've damaged myself here. So from that point on, I was like, right, I need to try and get some answers through the medical system, and that was to no avail. So I was going back and forth and couldn't get any answers. It really highlighted to me how poor the medical system is for things like chronic conditions, or things that they aren't like maybe consciously aware of, or that isn't built into the system. And I recognized then it was more about financial profit and the treatment of symptoms rather than getting to the root cause. And then, so after that, I went to the doctors to no avail. They only offered me sort of SSRIs, and I think they were going to go down the route of maybe looking at testosterone gels or whatever, but because it was so low. But I didn't want to do anything like that. I didn't want to just mess up my hormones anymore. I didn't know much at the time either. And so I kind of just thought, right, I'm going to just get on with my life. And it was the start of uni, and I just started going out drinking a lot and kind of masking the pain in a sense. And that went on for like 2 years, and symptoms got better over time, but I was still in a state of dysfunction, and they got better and then they got worse, and it got to a point when I just basically couldn't sleep. I had complete insomnia. I was urinating like 8 times a night. I had like lumps in my chest, just really bad anxiety, and a big symptom I would get was like intrusive thoughts. And 5-alpha reductase is really essential for producing GABA, which allows you to block unwanted thoughts essentially. And then when GABA's...
It's like your anti-anxiety mechanism basically,
Exactly,
isn't it?
It's your inbuilt anti-anxiety drug essentially. And it's one of the reasons why when you drink alcohol, you kind of feel more sociable and confident.
Because GABA's, alcohol's GABAergic, right?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
It's GABAergic.
That's why a lot of people will turn to drink when they're having anxiety problems.
And that was me. So I was kind of self-medicating with anything I could get my hands on just to feel normal. And that ended up me living quite hedonistic for 2 years. And obviously you're in uni, so a lot of people do that. But
What were you studying out of curiosity? Was it anything to do with science and health?
No. So I was doing product design, which was just kind of one of those bullshit courses that I just threw myself into, but because I wanted to get into just do something with my life when it was right before this happened. And to be fair, looking back, I enjoyed it, and it was useful because I've used a lot of those skills with like my page and the content that I make.
Okay, so that's where all the really aesthetic posts come from.
Yeah. And so that was like during uni, I was just kind of being this sort of degenerate in a sense. Like looking back, I mean, most people, a lot of teens and people in their early 20s were like that at uni, but that wasn't
standard uni life, isn't it?
Yeah, but that wasn't me as a person. That I was always that guy who liked to go to the gym and who was organised, and I enjoyed just like nature and things, but I just kind of leaned into like the party life, and so that kind of took a toll on my health even more. And you're not in a resilient place when you've got like hormonal chaos and a low metabolism. You're very susceptible to stress, and those things just compounded. And then I got really desperate. So like I was saying before, I started to notice really bad insomnia. These just symptoms got so much worse. And then I was like, right, I need to do something about this finally. Like, just take things into my own hands and really take action and stop being this sort of victim. And I was just started trying loads of different nutritional approaches, changing my diet. And that was the first time I actually noticed some respite from my symptoms, was changing my nutrition. And that was like a big moment for me. I was like, how have I not been taught this? Why don't the medical system tell me anything about this? And I unfortunately went down the route of doing like paleo and then keto and then carnivore. So that was the general progression. And the respite that I was getting, I was removing foods that I was probably intolerant to, because when you're in this lower metabolic state, your ability to digest some of the very pro-metabolic foods like milk and like even like just some of the less pro-metabolic foods like gluten and stuff, your digestion needs your digestive system needs a lot of energy to break down foods. And so I was in this low energy state, so whatever I was eating was just making my situation worse. It was increasing inflammation. And so these restrictive elimination diets, I saw respite my symptoms because I was removing foods that were kind of irritating my system and causing inflammation. But that was like a light bulb moment, because I'm like, now I'm actually seeing some change from my symptoms, and it's through changing my diet. And then I got absolutely obsessed with it. I was just researching like all the different nutrients and like how different compounds affect physiology. I was trying different supplements, and I made some big mistakes. I tried like different things like testosterone boosters to try and get my testosterone up, and they kind of made things a lot worse. And then
what kind of things did you try for that?
So that was just some of the basic, like the ones that you get from like a protein store, you know. And like,
okay. I've never tried those, really looked into them. What kind of things do they have? I'm guessing it's not like Shilajit and Sustancia and so on, you know, things which are actual, you know, natural good testosterone boosters.
Yeah, so at the time, so I was like 20, 21 maybe, and it was one of like these, I think it's like one of these protein stores in Leeds where I was at the time, and I went in, I just said, listen, I want the most like testosterone, give me the best testosterone boosting thing. And it was just like a load of herbs, ashwagandha.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I think they usually, actually, I think I remember looking at some before when I was like 18. I was going to the gym. I just wanted to get bigger. A lot of them were like ZMAs, zinc, magnesium, and vitamin A, which like is great, but get them for your diet rather than a supplement.
Exactly, and they're in like the forms are not bioavailable.
Yeah.
So they give you like
it's cheap shit, isn't it? It's not third-party tested, full of binders.
Exactly, and it's like zinc oxide, magnesium citrate, and so yeah, and it was like ashwagandha. So those things, like these herbal compounds, they can be quite risky, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And then I took those, and my health got even worse. And I remember thinking, I'm so desperate now. Like I just need some answers. And I was then I found like carnivore and went very restrictive. And that was the biggest change that I saw. So I had eliminated pretty much everything, and I kind of felt somewhat normal. Like my libido was coming back, my brain was kind of working again.
And you were full carnivore. It was just meat.
Yeah, and I didn't at the time. I wasn't doing like nose to tail. I was just eating like steak. This was in like 2018, so that it wasn't like, hadn't quite hit the mainstream like it did, and so I was just eating like steak, fish and eggs, so just pure protein. And yeah, my metabolism just went even further like downhill, because you're just restricting all carbohydrates. Your calories just naturally are lower, and you're just creating a state of scarcity in a sense with the carnivore. But you're eliminating all chance of kind of food intolerances. It's like the ultimate elimination diet. And eventually I went down just to red meat because I was reacting to the eggs and the fish. And what was going on internally is like I had to keep on restricting myself until I could feel like somewhat normal. And this is the trap with these elimination diets. You just have to keep on removing things until you're just down to red meat. And this is where people get stuck, right? And so I got to a point where with that, it was like I was reacting to eggs. I would get hives all over me. I would have histamine reactions. And so I was just down to red meat, and I was so low energy that I couldn't even walk into uni. Like I couldn't get out of my seat. I was so tired. And I remember just like literally one night just breaking down and like praying for like an answer. And then the next day I woke up and I did like my same routine that I go through. I go on my computer, I research, maybe do a bit of uni work. And I can't remember what I typed in, but I came across like an article of Ray Peat's, and I was carnivore at the time, and I came across one called Vegetables, Who Defines Food? And that was exactly the article that I needed to see at that time, because I was like demonizing like vegetables, and I was like thinking, oh, they're the worst thing for you and all these different things, and obviously sugar. I was like dead against carbohydrates and sugar. But the way like Ray's article encapsulated like some of these concepts, and it was so like eloquent and descriptive, but also tied it with all these other concepts that kind of exist outside of nutrition. I was like, who speaks like this? Like, why do no sort of doctors or scientists or whatever they may be, health influencers? This is like a really deep understanding of biology. And immediately I was like, I've landed on the right information here. And then from that point on, I was just delving into just countless articles of his and going on forums and finding like Instagram pages. And then I just became obsessed.
The Being Human podcast is brought to you by Raw Optics. In this day and age, if you really want to take care of your health, you've got to be maintaining a healthy light diet, and that means you need a good pair of blue blockers, and these are the best on the market in my opinion. Raw Optics are as effective as they are stylish. I wear these daylight lenses when I'm doing my work throughout the day. They really help me stay focused, eliminate eye strain, mood imbalances, headaches. They really just keep your focus and energy on an even keel. And then I switch over to these sunset lenses in the evening. These really help me wind down and get a good night's rest. All you need to do to pick up a set of these is to head over to rawoptics.com and use the code WAGLELE to get 10% off your order. That's rawoptics, ARoptics.com, and WAGLELE, WAGLELE, all caps, to get 10% off your order. Like you said, divine intervention, right? You get down on your knees, you pray, you're literally at rock bottom, and then the next day you stumble upon something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go into the mechanisms. What I would be interested to hear from you is, where are you at in terms of the definition of the quote-unquote diet that you follow now, or the definition of the health system in which you follow? Because this is something that I actively try to avoid, saying, oh, I like follow Peter's or, veganism, carnivore. It's easy to get tribal with diet, with health, but with diet especially. And I think anybody that's read Ray Peat's work, everyone that's familiar with Peating, will know like how powerful the principles are and how on the money so much of it is. But I personally still think like there's flaws in it. I think when you're somebody coming from the position that you are in, when you're in a hyper stress state, his work is the go-to, and I think it is almost a universal cure in that regard. But then even me, I think there's not really any room for fasting in the Ray Peat diet. But I'm somebody that I think like certain times, certain positions, people will actually, it will behoove them to fast, whether it's longer term fasts, whether they do like a 3-day fast, or whether it's even intermittent fasting. I mean, like someone like myself, I used to do intermittent fasting, and then I basically strayed away from it. And for me, like obviously a top priority for me as someone that's already got a good underlying base of health is athletic performance. And from an athletic performance standpoint, when I'm training 10, 12 sessions a week, I feel so much better when I'm eating around the clock rather than limiting myself to only eating at certain times, because having a certain eating window, it wouldn't necessarily allow me to eat after training in the evening, and then just even having like 20 grams of carbs after training in the evening helped with my sleep and how alert and alive I felt waking up the next morning. Like the difference was huge. Something I slept on for so long. But basically what I'm trying to say is I think horses for courses. I think sometimes people that are already in a great place with their health, some of the Ray Peat principles they don't necessarily need to follow. Like they can afford to do a bit of intermittent fasting, which might help with mental clarity, even more, and accentuate certain things. So where are you at in terms of how you define what you do now and the nuance and what you follow with Ray Peat?
So I would say the way I define the way I eat, I'm essentially trying to send a signal of abundance. So I'm providing my body exactly what it needs to work at optimal capacity, and always providing it with these signals. So nutrition and things like your lifestyle habits and environment. Like I'm of the belief you want to be sending the signal of abundance, and specifically with the nutrition, that's like lots of carbohydrates. These like natural sugars. These reflect an abundant environment, and then they help to keep the stress systems down. So they promote this like low stress state where you allow some of the more like the thyroid hormone and the reproductive hormones to flourish, and you can really be at your healthiest and most optimal. So I kind of view the definition as like of the nutrition is like it does come down to pro-metabolic, because you're trying to promote a state of high energy metabolism, which is like pro-metabolic, and that is as a byproduct of living in an abundant state, which comes from like eating foods that are rich in micronutrients, rich in quality fuel, easy to digest, and then also just eating enough and eating frequently enough to meet the demands of your system. So this is a big concept that maybe not a lot of people understand in the Peat sphere, is like the mismatch between stress and energy, and energy demands and energy supply. So stress is just from a guy called Hans Selye, who was like the godfather of stress, and Ray Peat kind of based some of his work off this biochemist and physiologist. He would say like stress is the mismatch between energy supply and energy demand, and a stressor has the capacity to cause stress. And so understanding that concept, you can see how to orientate your life to mitigate the damage of stress. So a lot of people get caught up in the Ray Peat view of health, is like, oh, people are just the Peaters are trying to avoid all stress. And that isn't, I think that's a misinterpretation. It's not, the idea isn't to avoid stress, it's to meet it with enough energy. And so of course we want to avoid unnecessary stress. So things like, if you can go with, if you can eat food and you can nourish your body, why fast? What would be the reason to fast, unless you had a specific, I don't know, a certain outcome that you want to achieve? But you'd argue that eating the correct food and food that you digest well and it's nutrient dense and it's fuel rich should only enhance your function. And fasting is kind of like a fool's gold in a sense, where you can feel that temporary energy, but it's at the expense of your long-term health. And the great thing about Peat's work in pro-metabolic eating is you can have your cake and eat it too. You can.
That's exactly. Sorry to interrupt. That's exactly what it feels like, isn't it? When you discover this way of eating, you're like, hang on a second, like I could drink a load of orange juice. I feel great doing it. I actually feel better doing that. And before you were told that's way too much sugar, like that's going to make you fat and lead to all kinds of consequences. Sorry.
Well, that's it. And it's like that. When I first realised that, I was like, it makes so much sense, but it's too good to be true. So like, we intrinsically as humans, especially when you're in that youthful high metabolism state, you crave sugar, and you crave it for a reason, because your biology is geared towards running at a higher level. This is what we want to experience. We want to experience life on this higher plane. And a good way to think of this is the childlike state. So the child is is high energy, can sleep deeply, heals rapidly, creative, open-minded, basically all the things that we should want throughout to continue throughout into adulthood. And obviously stresses kind of bring you back down to reality and your age, but the childlike state is one of high metabolism, and children crave sugar, and I see it as a crime when parents restrict natural sugars, like even fruit and honey.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? And this runs our biology, like natural sugar, and this is what allows us to be in that higher state of health. And so when I realized that it clicked, it's like, of course sugar is important. Like, why would we have whole systems in place to crave it? And why do we crave it in times of stress? Is because it's a way of mitigating the stress of the external stress or whatever it may be. But the problem that I see is most people have lost the ability to use sugar through accumulated stresses over time, and different things like polyunsaturated fats accumulating in the tissues. And so when these people try to consume sugar, they get hit with problems, and they meet kind of like issues. And this is where they see the elevations in blood sugar, and over time you can see things like diabetes. And it's because they're consuming sugar in congruence with a poor diet with lots of seed oils, and also the cells, they're in a state of ill health essentially, and they've accumulated these stresses, and the metabolism is geared towards using less efficient fuel sources and also running on stress hormones. So you add sugar to that, and you're not changing the state of the system, and you're kind of making things worse. So there's definitely nuance to it, but yeah, that's kind of the overarching view that I take with nutrition. It's like we're trying to send that signal of abundance, but it does require nuance, and it is context dependent, because you need to be in a position where you can actually use these foods constructively. Like 2 years ago, I couldn't handle any dairy, and dairy is now like a key part of my diet, and it's been, my health has gone on leaps and bounds since I was able to get it in. But adding in this very healthy food, this pro-metabolic food, 2 years ago would have messed me up. Like every time I tried to drink it, I'd do all the different protocols. I'd do like small sips 3 times a day. Nothing would work, and it was making me feel worse. So it requires nuance and context and an understanding of how your body works. And
I think that's brilliant when it comes to defining stress and looking at stress. Stress isn't just this isolated thing. It's an equation, and it's brilliant the way you laid it out. Energy supply versus the demand versus the supply. Like, how much stress can you take on? And that's mean, if you're in a bad place with your health, you're going to be limited with the amount of stress you take on. So like doing really hard, intense training is not necessarily going to be the most beneficial thing. Doing like really long endurance work isn't necessarily going to be the most beneficial thing. Doing cold plunges, but then when you're in a good place with your health, then you're able to add these things in. And that's what I mean. I think, like I imagine Ray, he was aware of all this, but then as it's been fed down into the health sphere, into the Ray Peat community, the Ray Peat world, people have misinterpreted this as, cold plunges are bad.
Yeah.
If you're in a certain place with your health, yes, they're going to be bad. But if you're in a really good place metabolically and you're able to take on a lot of stress, a lot of sympathetic stress, then they can be a great addition. I mean, like I do a cold plunge every morning, which I know is like so like cliche, does jiu-jitsu, cold plunges, etc.
Yeah.
But I don't even do that from like a metabolism standpoint, thermogenesis. Obviously, we were talking about this earlier, like the data, the studies on this, like you can pick them apart, and some people are going to really advocate for them on the metabolic standpoint. Some people are going to say like they're actually not that great. But for me, I do them just because mentally, I do it for the mental benefits. Like it builds mental resilience in me, forcing me to do something that you really never want to do, throw yourself in cold water.
Yeah.
But yeah, like stress is an equation, and you've got to ask yourself, what stress is good for me? How much of it can I take on, rather than just thinking this is stressful, this isn't stressful. And And I don't know if you've seen this on, I saw this on X recently, I think, Aesthetic Primal, if you follow that account.
Great account.
He really knows his stuff. He was talking about this, the difference between sympathetic stress versus parasympathetic stress, which was never something I thought of, because you think of sympathetic stress as stress, and you know, the parasympathetic nervous system as the rest and digest. But I need to read more into it, but I assume what he was referring to was this idea that, like, going into just this like comfortable, restful state of living brings its own stress with it. And someone like me that's quite like a type A person, that I really identified with that, because for me, if I'm training hard, taking on loads of, doing, building businesses, doing things like this podcast, doing loads of writing, all these things which I really have to engage my mind and body in. These are like stressful things, but I love doing them. It's where my passion is. These geese are insane, aren't they? These are, that's where my passion is. So even on paper.
They're on the fight over there. We're in their territory.
Yeah, we are in their territory. Thankfully, these mics are pretty good. I think you won't really hear it too much.
Knock it out, good.
Apart from when they go ballistic like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when you're doing something you love, stress doesn't really feel like stress in that regard. But for me, like sitting down, resting, obviously you need to do that. But if I do too much of that, and I do what a doctor, someone might prescribe as de-stressing. If I do too much of that, that is far more stressful for me than doing more work, because of the way I'm wired.
Well, yeah, so this as well, I think this is Ray Peat's work. It encompasses so much more than just the nutrition. It's like it goes into things like novelty, environmental enrichment, things that exist far...
novelty, I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
Things that exist far outside of the realm of just nutrition, like having a routine, being stuck in a routine, in old thinking patterns, being in a comfort zone where you never really progress, that can be stressful in itself. Although you could be in like a parasympathetic state, you're still like, you're not living life. And so Ray Peat was an advocate of actually living life, and say living your life is healthy, like experience, novelty, and seeing new places, having meaningful interactions, good relationships. All of these things can be pro-metabolic, because these things can fill in for a role that other aspects of your health might not. So like, this is where we see the centenarians that live to 100 and they can smoke cigs and drink alcohol. And it's like, well, because their life is meaningful to a degree. They've got a family unit, they live in, maybe they get lots of sunlight, and they live out in nature. And so it's not just like this paradigm that he kind of proposed. It's not just, cut out all carbohydrates and get into a state of ketosis. It's like, what does your life look like? What are you doing with yourself? Are you pursuing purpose? Like, and so the whole stress angle, I think, is one that needs to be considered a lot more, because routine can be a stressor, right? Lack of novelty can be a stressor, and I've experienced this firsthand. So recently, I've been experiencing as much novelty as possible. I've kind of been bouncing all over the place and going away, and it's very fortunate that I'm able to do this. But you can experience novelty without having, without going on holiday. Like, you can literally just walk down the same street that you walk down every day, just on the other side of the road, or take a different path, or just change up the music that you're listening to. It can be as simple as that. And it can cause a pattern interrupt, and it can change the way you view your situation, and kind of get you out of that learned helplessness state where everything is monotonous and boring, and that can have such a feed-forward effect on your health going forward. And these kind of activities, they're important in the long run, and they get neglected. So if your life is revolved around health, and you have to wake up at 6 a.m. and do a cold plunge, and then do, journal and do meditation and do all these different things, that in itself can become a routine, and that could become a stressor eventually, right? And so I also wanted to talk about the point of stressor versus stress. So this is another concept from Hans Selye. And a stressor is something that has the propensity to become stress. And a stressor could be something enjoyable. It could be an exciting event. It could be something like an argument with a significant other, or it could be like a game of chess. It could be exercise. It could be lack of sleep. But these things create a demand for energy. So even sunlight can be a stressor in the wrong context, right? And so these things demand energy, and if you're not supplying sufficient energy to the system, then that stressor will become stress. And so how this looks in the body is, a prime example is like a drop in blood sugar. So if you are playing, like people that play chess, like professional chess players, they can burn up to like 1,000 calories.
It's insane.
They're just moving their arm like back and forth. It's like, well, where are those calories going? Well, when you recognize that the brain is a supercomputer and it runs on glucose, they're just burning through fuel like there's no tomorrow, because they're using this supercomputer to play a game. And that's kind of what the calories in, calories out crowd kind of forget. Like, even watching a scary movie can use resources and can be a stressor. And so understanding that, then you can understand how to meet the stress with enough energy. So, and this is like, well, you've got to fuel yourself correctly. You've got to keep up with the demands that you're placing on the system. You've got to eat enough sugar to keep your blood sugar stable, so prevent your body dipping into the stress cascade. Because what happens, obviously, when your blood sugar starts to run low, it can be life-threatening. So there's whole systems in place to increase your blood sugar. So you break down your own body tissue through the action of cortisol to liberate glucose into the bloodstream, but obviously at the expense of your own body tissue. And it can be like collagen, it can even be like your skin. And that's to keep you alive, to keep the level of blood sugar at a state that your brain is getting enough to just function without passing out. And so when you enter a stress state, you are now relying on things like stress hormones to run your biology. And that over time takes you away from that higher energetic state, because the body has to adapt. So constantly running into this, like a stress state, will cause these adaptations. And so the opposite is constantly meeting the stress with enough energy and fueling yourself consistently, and obviously having the supporting nutrients that run energy metabolism, like micronutrients, trace minerals and vitamins. And so that the point is, it's like you can like live a life that is that obviously with you and your like grappling, like that will take its toll on your body if you don't support it with enough fuel. And you'll if you don't supply enough fuel, you will degrade in a sense, and you will break down muscle tissue, and your energy metabolism will start to down regulate. So you've got to meet that exercise with enough fuel, because that stressor can quickly become a stress, and then it can be counterproductive to your end goal of being like a world champion grappler. And so yeah, that's the point that I want to really hammer home, is like meeting the stresses with enough energy, and that energy comes from our food. Like we create energy on a cellular level from the conversion of fuel into ATP, and obviously some other byproducts like CO2 and water and heat. And so yeah, you need nutrition. Nutrition runs your biology, and a lot of people are just running on empty really, and restricting themselves, under eating, overtraining. And that's kind of what got me into my state of ill health, where I was just training all the time and not fueling correctly, and kind of set in motion all the problems that I dealt with.
Yeah, I think people really underestimate, people that aren't familiar with this stuff really underestimate the power of sugar. Like you were saying, bro, for me, I've discovered it is a really simple equation. The more sugar I consume in a day, the more I can train. Yeah. It almost is that simple. There's obviously other stuff, got to make sure you warm up properly, cool down properly, do my soft tissue mobilization, stretching, make sure, again, you're getting all the minerals, micronutrients and protein that you need to like actually support the structure if I'm not getting enough collagen. Not eating nose to tail. My tendons aren't going to be able to keep up with the workload demand. It's not just as simple as sugar, but in terms of your central nervous system, being able to ramp things up metabolically and go and expend energy 2-3 times a day. For me, I see a
Game
direct
changer.
direct correlation between that and my carb intake.
Yeah.
It sounds so simple, but it really is true.
And I want to make the point as well, everyone on planet Earth is running on sugar. Like you can't escape it, because if you don't consume it through your diet, you will be forced to make it endogenously.
Gluconeogenesis.
Exactly, gluconeogenesis. And that process is inherently stressful. Like it requires...
It's a massive energy demand.
Yeah, and you think about you breaking down built up muscle tissue. So first it will be things like circulating amino acids from protein. Then later, as you dip further into the stress system, you'll be breaking down muscle tissue.
And then your bones eventually.
You become catabolic. And activating these stress hormones, it activates a whole cascade of events that change like you hormonally, especially over time. So you see increases in things like adrenaline. Obviously cortisol is driving the breakdown of the tissue, but then like estrogen, serotonin to kind of put the brakes on energy metabolism, which is something maybe we'll touch on. Serotonin is not quite what we've been led to believe. And over time, when you're in that state, the body has to adapt. So when you're chronically under the influence of the stress hormones, your metabolism has to dial down, and that is at the expense of higher level function. So if you think about a house, let's say you take a mansion and you're heating it up with a boiler, and you're running out of fuel. So you shut off the least important areas of the house, right? And you keep the most important areas heated up, really. And so how that applies to the body is the body will, there's like an intelligent prioritization in the body. So it will start to shut off the less important processes to keep energy for the most essential ones. And this is when we see like loss of like hair and like skin quality going down and libido dropping, because these aren't essential to our survival. These are less important than just running basic biological processes like liver function, brain function. But as you go down the stress cascade and slowly enter what I call like a metabolic hole, where you keep on running on stress hormones, you're not meeting those energy demands, your health just continues to suffer, and then eventually you hit like a chronic health condition or like a disease, and that is because you've gone down the layers of stress to a point where your body no longer has the energy, the resources to even power the most important processes, and then that's when you enter a health issue. But a lot of people are just kind of subsisting in this like lower state of self, even if they're not experiencing these chronic health conditions. Their metabolic dial has been turned down to a degree, and high level functions have been shut off. And so a big one is like your mental faculties, your ability to perceive situations or think intuitively or be open-minded requires energy.
Decision making, I find, more than anything.
Yeah.
Like when I'm in a low energy state, it's my decision making that I notice suffers the most. My ability to just decide what I'm doing next.
Yeah.
Like whereas when I'm
like action, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When I'm in a high energy state, I'll look at a situation, I'll be like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Whereas I dither so much when I'm,
I did a quote, I did a post on this or a tweet on X, and it was, your indecisiveness and doubt screams elevated endotoxin. So
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And so endotoxin,
and that's, sorry to interrupt, that's really true, because I notice it most like if I've eaten shit food the night before.
Yeah.
The next day, like especially if I've eaten it close to bed, the next day that's when I notice that brain fog, that indecisiveness more than anything.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a direct correlation with me. Like food that I don't tolerate well, maybe I've eaten something, or I've just, for whatever reason, I've had like a gut reaction. The next day I'm like immobile. I can't do anything. Like I'm just can't take action. I can't think straight. And the opposite is when you are in that high energy state and everything is effortless. Like you just take action. You don't even question. And this is the difference between being in like this stagnated, closed off state to one of intuition, and one where you just immediately have the answer. And it sounds a bit woo-woo, but you have to really experience it for yourself. And I think as humans, we've all had those moments where things are just effortlessly flowing. That is the default state. That is what we should be getting back to. is a state of just action, and especially as young men who are under the influence of hormones as well, and that kind of gear you towards taking action. But that's something that's lost, is that that ability to be intuitive and really go for it, really. And being in that, like, so endotoxin, just for some context, is like a byproduct of bacterial proliferation or death. So when bacteria die or they proliferate, they can produce this LPS, which is a byproduct of some bacteria. And this is like kind of the primordial sin to human physiology is endotoxin. It's like a war that we've been waging for the beginning of time. We have whole systems in place to kind of trying to break it down and metabolize it and get it out of the system, and it just lowers your vitality like nothing else. And this is a big stressor on the system, is endotoxin. So you could be eating, like I was saying before, you could be eating the perfect diet, but if you're reacting to a food, regardless of how healthy it's considered or how nutrient dense it is, you'll be producing endotoxin as a byproduct, and then your liver has to break that down, and as a result you have a cascade of like elevated serotonin, which then definitely like affects brain energy like nothing else, high serotonin, and that kind of goes in combination with something like endotoxin and histamine. And so the whole mental faculty thing is when you're in like this burdened state that your digestive tract and your liver is having to deal with this poison, essentially, you cannot be in that high energy intuitive state. Your body is kind of overburdened with, or it's overburdened with trying to deal with this stressor, and you have like a temporary downtick in metabolism, and your neurotransmitters will kind of be skewed slightly. Dopamine will drop, serotonin will rise, and you just can't think straight. Like, you have brain fog, you'll feel kind of flat and anhedonic, so you'll be like emotionless. And the opposite is when you've got a clean digestive tract and a liver full of glycogen, and you're in that energized state, like, things are effortless. And you can probably attest to this. Like,
oh yeah. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's people that, like normies, that just eat McDonald's all the time. I think like it's because you don't know any different. You don't know like how well and efficiently you could be operating, because once you go down this path, like I said, that the mechanisms you've just laid out, I can identify with those so clearly. Like you said, I know when my endotoxin's elevated. Yeah. By the way, I'm just like sitting in this, dithering is the best way I can put it. I could just like sit here all day and just basically do nothing and ultimately think nothing, make no decisions, take no action, because basically this elevated endotoxin, because I've eaten shit food and my body's had a reaction to it. And I think that's an important thing to clarify, because for a long time I thought of endotoxin as the endotoxin is in the food. It's like the phytoestrogens in the food itself. No, it's our body's reaction to it. It's like histamine. Yeah. It's almost like cholesterol. People think like cholesterol is this this inherently bad thing. No, like that cholesterol, your body's producing cholesterol, okay, for steroid hormones, but when we're talking about clogging up arteries, your body's producing that cholesterol, sending that cholesterol to the arteries to patch up inflammation there. It's your body's reaction to it. Like endotoxin, it's not that the food you've eaten contains endotoxin. The food you're eating is, it's inflammatory. Your body's reacting to it.
I mean, you can actually consume food with endotoxin.
Oh, can you?
But it's as a result of bacterial.
Right. Like, okay. From the back. Okay.
Yeah, so if you eat like old meat, even like some deli meats and stuff, these are quite high in endotoxin. This can cause like.
So it's almost very much like histamine. Your body can produce histamine in reaction to certain foods, but then there are also foods that are inherently, they contain dietary histamine. Yeah,
exactly. But the major source of endotoxin is, like you said,
in our own gut.
From our own gut, and it's like it's so our physiology and the stress systems and like the immune system is so geared towards kind of getting it out of the body and dealing with it, and it's a very important process because it leads to sepsis and then death. Like, probably the sepsis is probably throughout history one of the main causes of death by humans, right? And that is under the influence of endotoxin. It's just basically endotoxin out of control, and the body becomes infected, and sepsis kicks in, and then you die essentially. So it's a real insult to physiology. So we've got to be careful, but also it just shows the importance of eating food that you can digest well, and also just avoiding food that maybe contains it, or like regardless of whether you can digest something well, some foods are going to promote endotoxemia. And there's also ways to mitigate it with other foods. So like orange juice can mitigate the damage of endotoxin.
Oh, can it?
Yeah. So
what's the mechanism behind that?
So some of the flavonoids in it, so like naringin, these they have like anti-endotoxin capabilities, and they did a study. I think they actually used a McDonald's as an example, or like a fast food, and they compared that with consuming a meal like that without orange juice, just with water, and then with orange juice, and like the blood sugar response was miles better from the one with orange juice, which you'd think intuitively, or from a mainstream perspective, why is the blood sugar response better with more sugar in it in the meal? But and also just I think like the post prandial like blood sugar markers, and also like endotoxin markers were elevated.
I love this because this is justifying my Tropicana with the Big Mac meal.
But yeah, like I mean, it's just, this is like Peat, but like Peat is like, I mean, like orange juice is a big peaty food, right?
Yeah, it's like the classic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think even orange juice can be an insult to the system. Like if you have a shitty orange juice, like a tart one, it can be irritating to the intestines and cause issues. Like I remember when I first got into Peat's ideas, and I was drinking, like I would just get orange juice from the store. It took me a while to find one that actually worked for me. And like freshly squeezed will be miles better.
That's why I love the Marks and Spencer's one, unpasteurized.
And
when I first looked at it, I was like, unpasteurized orange juice. I didn't even know orange juice was pasteurized. And then I started looking into it, and I was like, oh my god, it's basically just like milk. If you have pasteurized orange juice, you've got so much of the benefits from the flavonoids taken out of it. You're not going to digest it the same. It's not going to have the same
less
effects.
Enzymes and stuff.
Less potassium, well, vitamin C is more heat sensitive than potassium. Potassium is a bit more stable, but less vitamin C. Now it's unpasteurized orange juice only, freshly squeezed.
Good man.
And
like even like I would say orange juice across the board, if you digest it well, it is a helpful food, because it will still contain like potassium, vitamin C, obviously the sugars, which is what I'm after, and then the flavonoids that come along to support it. But like you were saying, the unpasteurized stuff is going to be much higher in some of those flavonoids and enzymes, and also vitamin C will be more intact. But a great thing about Ray's work as well, like he was of the belief, he wanted to create a diet that was accessible to all. He didn't want health to be just for the people who have money or the wealthy, and so a lot of his nutritional recommendations were for like both nutritious and widely accessible and cheap. So
the food of the peasantry almost.
Exactly. And if you think about a lot of the traditional foods, like the healthy ones, like the gelatinous ones, like the offcuts, I mean, they're cheap as chips in the UK. And so things like milk, and just to touch on milk, he said if you digest milk well, it doesn't matter if it's pasteurized or raw. Obviously raw has its benefits, but you're still getting an incredibly nutritious food source. You're getting calcium. There's still some lactoferrin intact, which is a very supportive molecule. You're getting like the digestible proteins, the bioavailable proteins, the digestible carbs.
And saturated fat.
And saturated fat. So it is a superfood regardless, but it's more about what you have access to, what you can digest, and whether it is like suitable to human physiology. Because no food is ever really demonized, maybe other than PUFA, but it's just how does it work on on a physiological level? What is it actually provide? What is the food providing you? Is it providing micronutrients? Is it digestible? If it's not digestible, is there a way of breaking it down? So cooking it or preparing it, soaking it, sprouting it. Like it's like, what is the food actually giving you? Is it providing you with fuel that you can actually use, or is it like the polyunsaturated fats that are damaging you on a cellular level and not really it's not constructive at all to health? It's like, it's the overarching principles that Ray Peat would promote. It's like, it was never like a specific food that you should eat across the board, but it is important to recognize that things like milk, orange juice, liver, oysters, these are very nutrient dense and protective foods, and so if you can get them into your diet and you can digest them, it's very important.
Let's get into the nitty gritty of serotonin then.
Okay.
Because serotonin, we're told it's the happy hormone. That's what it's defined as in the mainstream. And like I said, anybody goes to the doctors with bad mental health issues, they're going to be prescribed SSRIs, antidepressants. What is serotonin? What does it do? Again, I think a lot of people in the Ray Peat community demonize serotonin, and I think obviously a lot of people have too much serotonin, which is why that is the case, but it's there for a reason. It's just unfortunately the way we live, many people's serotonin levels, they're just far too elevated, and because of the way that it's used or the way that it's looked at in mainstream modern medicine, it becomes a source of it becomes a problem for a lot of people. But let's go into serotonin.
So serotonin, it's technically not a hormone, it's a neurotransmitter, and it has many physiological processes, probably some that we don't even realize, and of course it's essential and we need it. It's just kind of important to understand its like main role in physiology and when it becomes elevated, because it can give you an idea of what it's actually doing and whether it's supportive or not. And I would like to preface that, like, you can never demonize a neurotransmitter or hormone. It's just,
even something like prolactin, it's there for a reason.
Like there are times when you need these things, right? The stress hormones keep you alive, cortisol keeps you alive, and these things are important, but it's kind of coming away from that idea of more is better, or and so understanding serotonin, I like to view it as like, it's a stress mediator that elevates in times of like energy depletion, and it also causes helps you expel toxins from your gut, and so it promotes gastric movements, which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the context. But as an energy mediator, like,
and in that regard, does it directly promote endotoxin release as well?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're experiencing, I think it's more the other way around.
Right,
like if
the endotoxin elevates serotonin.
Exactly, yeah. And so there is like a two-way relationship with these things, but if you've encountered some sort of food that you don't digest well, or you've maybe some like old meat or whatever it may be, or you've had a food reaction, serotonin will rise as a means to expel that food from your intestines faster, and it's kind of used in that circumstances to speed up the digestive process and get that food out of your body quicker. It can also be from irritated intestines, so like the twisting and torquing of the intestines. So a lot of long distance runners tend to shit themselves after a certain amount of miles, and it's because their serotonin levels increase, not only because of this torquing mechanism in the intestines, but also just a byproduct of elevations in stress hormones, because serotonin tends to run parallel with other stress systems, and also just like that fatigue that happens from overtraining. So another thing that serotonin does, especially in the brain regions, is it's one of the reasons that we become fatigued, right? And so if you give someone a dopamine agonist or increase dopamine to an extent, their ability to become fatigued is so much lower. So they can get away with like exercising beyond the point of what they would normally be able to do, because dopamine opposes serotonin. It's kind of like a seesaw effect. So if dopamine's elevated, serotonin's low. And that applies to things like prolactin and testosterone as well. They're all kind of incongruence, but this energy sensing, like the body has like these processes in play where if you are pushing the limits with exercise, serotonin will rise to put you in that fatigue, low energy state. And it's like a metabolic buffer, so it keeps you from overexerting yourself. In the context of like in the context of like physiology and like survival, serotonin kind of allows you to last the course between things like famine. So that's when it's chronically elevated. So we've kind of touched on the acute increases in serotonin, how it kind of makes you fatigued after exercise and also expels something from the intestines. Like the chronic effects of serotonin are kind of to keep you from burning unnecessary amounts of fuel, and it is heavily involved in turning down the metabolic dial. And a good illustration of this is that of bears during hibernation. So serotonin rises as a means to kind of prevent their metabolism from being at a point where it just burns through unnecessary amounts of fuel, so it keeps them alive through a famine essentially. So obviously hibernation, they don't eat, they go into this like very serotonergic state. They become very like docile and weak, and they kind of curl up in a ball and sleep throughout winter, and that is mediated by serotonin. Now apply that to humans that don't hibernate, and you're chronically in this low energy state where your life is kind of just like monotonous, boring. Every day you've not got the energy to think expansively, and that's like chronically elevated serotonin. That can be as a result of being in this low energy state. And so humans, although we don't hibernate, we can almost enter a form of hibernation where we turn down all these higher level processes and we kind of subsist. And I think this is a lot of the population today. We're seeing these kind of very closed-minded people who are stuck in routine, and they don't question things, because serotonin influences your ability to think expansively and creatively. And this is actually why something like LSD in the right dose allows you to perceive the world in a different manner, because it lowers serotonin. So in a microdose, it drops serotonin very low, and these people become more creative, they become more expansive, they're more adventurous. In higher doses, serotonin rises, and that's what instigates the like hallucinations. So a lot of these hallucinogenic drugs are actually because of elevations in serotonin.
But it's an ephemeral elevation, isn't it? It's a spike rather than a chronically elevated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like ayahuasca.
I was going to say, I assume it's the same for kind of all psychedelics, psilocybin, DMT.
Yeah, above a threshold, and people who take these like psychoactive drugs, they see like demonic entities. And I'm of the belief like serotonin, when your serotonin is low, you're much more connected with divinity and God and like the divine, and you're able to be like this intuitive version of yourself that's connected to nature. And that's kind of why LSD allows you to connect with nature and see your reality in a different light. But then when you go over that threshold and you have a bad trip, for example, or you take DMT or ayahuasca, you are essentially doing the opposite of that. And you whether you believe in like God and these other things, it's like, well, you can have horrendous like nightmares, for example, which are usually mediated by serotonin. So elevations in serotonin during the night usually instigate things like night terrors and nightmares. But you can artificially create that scenario with something like ayahuasca, and it can make people go insane like ayahuasca. Like there's a classic tweet, I think it's by Landshark, where he said people will go to ayahuasca and get gigafried. Go to a tropical country, take ayahuasca, and the brain will get gigafried to the point of like no return, something along those lines. And it went really viral because that does happen. Like people will take these psychoactive drugs and never really be the same. And I think probably reasons for it. But yeah, the deep hallucinations are mediated by like serotonin, and they're not fun. But
well, it's interesting. I mean, you're speaking to like a real psychedelic enthusiast. I love psychedelics, and I love going heavy with them. So I wonder if, I don't know, in my mind, like whether it's just coping, because to me, I feel like when I do a heavy trip, light or heavy, I feel like it's like a direct line to God. It's, you know what I mean? It's meditation. It's enhanced meditation.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's, you know, serotonin, these spikes that you create through taking something like a psychedelic substance. The spikes, okay, it's when it's chronically elevated. You know, something like cortisol, almost like cortisol in that regard. You don't want cortisol chronically elevated, but like cortisol, so you get up and go, it can be beneficial. So maybe that's just cope. I'm thinking about it in my mind through my experience with them.
So they probably do have a lot of value, and it's not just serotonin that they increase various other neurotransmitters, and they change, obviously they change your mental state in other ways. So it would be wrong just to point the finger at serotonin. I'm more kind of talking about the bad trips, you know, when people experience these really nasty sort of trips when they take psychedelics.
And they kind of enter psychosis rather than, it's not enlightenment, but you know what I mean?
Well, like temporarily, like you could go on a bad trip and experience some weird, like horrible scenes or whatever. And
well, people get schizophrenic, don't they?
Yeah, and that's very closely tied with a lot of these neurotransmitters, like chronically elevated serotonin.
And so maybe it's a case of what you can handle, stressor versus stress.
Yeah, and I would say with serotonin as well, like we were saying before, it plays its role, and when the problem is when it's chronically elevated. Acute elevations, like naturally without using like substances, that's usually from like any sort of insult to the body. But like chronic elevation, that's a real problem, I think, and that's a big problem that we see today. And just to touch on some of the things, because we're taught through school and just popular culture that serotonin is just this happy hormone and everything. It basically blunts emotions. So I don't know if you've heard of anhedonia, which is like some men have like a side effect from taking ashwagandha, which is it locks them into this state of like an anhedonic state where they're emotionless. So serotonin can cause that, and it can also just kind of, it's used in a clinical setting for SSRI, in the form of SSRIs, which are serotonin reuptake inhibitors, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And these are just basically preventing the degradation of serotonin. So serotonin stays elevated in the brain for longer than it normally would. And a lot of the way these drugs work, they work indirectly through something called like allopregnanolone. So they increase allopregnanolone in the brain, which is a very protective molecule. So that's kind of a byproduct of using these, and that happens over time. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we see some benefits in the studies. But another reason why people kind of get some respite from whatever they're dealing with mentally is because serotonin kind of numbs emotions. So if you're very up and down and you're experiencing a lot of grief, or a lot of heartache or whatever, serotonin is the mediator for that. So if you lose a loved one, your serotonin is very likely to shoot up, and that's to prevent you from kind of just burning huge amounts of calories from the stress.
Right. Okay.
And so you think about someone after they lose a loved one, like what is their demeanor? Like a lot of these things, obviously there's other things going on with emotions, but you kind of see like there's no one behind their eyes. It's like this, they call it the serotonin stare, like the 1,000-yard stare. The 1,000-yard stare is the serotonin stare. It's when you look through someone and you kind of just, you're out of it, right? And how many people have that, right?
Yeah, too right. Wow, yeah. Yeah, no, this is really interesting. Yeah, it seems to me, as you've said, serotonin, it's this protective neurotransmitter, so it can be beneficial in the short term, but over the long term, because it puts us into this comfort state, it brings us back to baseline, it can actually put us into a chronically decline. It can bring the baseline down in the long term. Because to be open about it, I mean, like I'm really against pharmaceuticals if I'm going to like make a general statement like that, especially when it comes to antidepressants. I think you should feel whatever it is you're feeling in this existence as much as you can bear it. But like I was diagnosed with OCD when I was 14, 15 years old, and like, again, whether I don't know whether I like making a defining statement like this, but I've still got it now. I've got OCD. Like, that's very clear to me, and I think I do a good job of using it as a force for good in my life.
Weaponize it.
I like that. I weaponize it rather than letting it control me at this point. But I had a really bad time for like the first year or two when it came about, and I was in a really bad place. And the doctors kept saying, let's try antidepressants. My mum kept saying no. She didn't want me to go on them. It got to the point where she eventually caved. Me, I was kind of not indifferent to them, but like I was just a kid at that point. I didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't really have any ideas about how I was going to get through it, how I was going to recover. I was just following, the advice of doctors and the counsellor, the therapist that I was seeing. But my mum eventually caved because it was at such a bad point. And looking back, I notice it now clearly as well. And my mum says it. She said, when you started taking those, the difference was less than a week. And from there, it was an upward trajectory. And a year later, I came off them after tapering down. And it's been, ups and downs, but smooth sailing ever since. And that's what I mean. So, like, I'm really kind of dead against them. But then
they served a purpose.
Exactly. Like, I can't lie. They really brought me out of a hole. I don't know if there was any. I'd like to think there was, obviously I would have gotten out of that hole anyway. But no doubt they had a massively beneficial effect. So, but again, I'm really against people going to pharmaceuticals unless it's absolutely necessary, especially with these SSRIs.
Well, I definitely wouldn't ever discredit that. And like, there are so many anecdotes of people having benefits from these things.
But then there's so many anecdotes of people, it makes them worse, right?
Yeah, and it can have the complete opposite effect. But also a big thing so I touched on it before, but SSRIs can increase allopregnanolone in the brain, which is essential for blocking unwanted thoughts, which is very important for OCD. And that isn't directly how they work, that's kind of a byproduct of how they work. So there would be much safer interventions in my mind that would promote allopregnanolone and things like GABA that would be protective against OCD that someone could go to before trying those things. And there's so many really beneficial compounds that we can access through even like Amazon, like just there are at our disposal. NMDA blockers are very good for OCD. So these are things like L-theanine, magnesium. And there's also like these kind of work in congruence with GABA. And so the point I would kind of hammer home is like there are much safer alternatives to try first. And it's also important to understand how these drugs are actually working. And I don't think the medical system do a good job of explaining that at all. But
I think for the most part they don't know.
They don't even know. And this is the problem. Like, why should I have to go on this whole journey to figure this out for myself? That's not normal. Like I've had to obsess over this stuff, and you obviously, because I dealt with OCD. So after taking those DHT blockers, that was one of the most prominent symptoms.
Wow.
And because, as we mentioned before, the GABA and the allopregnanolone, that gets fried when you take a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, because the conversion of progesterone into allopregnanolone requires 5-alpha reductase. And men have a lot of progesterone in the brain, especially when you're youthful. And so that, it's not just the conversion of testosterone into DHT. 5-alpha reductase is involved with loads of different hormonal conversions. I think it's also involved in the degradation of cortisol, so your cortisol more elevated. But the point being is I had really bad OCD, so to the point where I was like, some of the symptoms of OCD, you try and control your external environment to kind of deal with what's going on internally, and some that might look like keeping things orderly, or it could be as bad as like ruminating over something just constantly.
You're stuck in a thought loop.
Yeah, and so that was happening to me a lot. So I actually thought I was going insane when I first had those symptoms.
Oh, it feels like it.
Yeah, and I mean OCD is like, it's I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, to be fair, because some of the the classical example of it is like you're trying to control things, but also it's more what happens on like a cognitive level, or like with these loops that you get caught up in, and you get like really horrible symptoms. And so the point being is that those symptoms, like you're in like a state of desperation, and you'd look for anything to kind of resolve that. And so fortunately for me, it was the process of actually going keto for a bit, just removing those foods that I think were irritating my intestines and messing with my neurotransmitters, and also actually entering a state of kind of hibernation was necessary for me to kind of reduce what was going on with like all the brain firing and everything. Because I think being in that lower metabolic state, you kind of, it is a form of protection in a sense, temporarily, but when you're chronically in it, it's going to mess you up.
You don't want to stay there for long.
Yeah.
I like that. A nice little OCD stack. we got allopregnanolone, like any kind of GABAergic compounds, L-theanine, magnesium. Yeah, I'm going to have to like formalise that into, that's cool. I'll obviously give you credit. Upgrade James's OCD stack.
Yeah.
How much value do you think there is in kind of limiting plant-based foods to improving OCD or improving serotonin? Obviously, like plant-based foods can be very high in tryptophan, and that's obviously that's the building block of serotonin. Do you think there's any value in like going animal-based to improve like your serotonin levels, improve OCD?
So I think these like elimination diets, there is value in them, because you get in tune with your biology, you get in tune with what works for you. You remove like pretty much all foods that are potentially problematic. Red meat is one of the least problematic foods. It still can be problematic in the wrong context, but temporarily just going down to removing these foods can give you a good insight as to what's causing issues. Although I don't think that's the way to go about it, because you can set yourself up for issues in the long run. Like you can cause food intolerances by removing them, and also you're lowering your energy. Just removing carbohydrates, your energy metabolism is going to drop, and that's going to come with all these other issues. But
like you said, you can do that, but you can also have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, so the way I'd go about it is just really keeping like a basic diet, but making sure you have carbohydrates in place. So like going low FODMAP can even help. The FODMAP are like fermentable oligosaccharide, disaccharide, monosaccharide, and polyols. So these are like types of sugars that are very easily undigested. So what happens is they kind of reach the large intestines, and they feed either beneficial or gram-negative bacteria, and that can cause a whole host of like issues, from things like SIBO to like neurological issues if you've got a leaky gut, and they're basically causing elevations in endotoxin. So removing like these high FODMAP foods for temporarily, this is what I kind of did. So I was removing things like apples and pears, and kind of predominantly having things like pineapple and these
dates are high FODMAP, aren't they?
Yeah, so
it tends to be like kind of really fibrous fruit, right?
Yeah, and soluble fiber can be a problem as well. So I would I would remove any sort of potential irritating foods, and this happened as a byproduct, because I had gone on like a carnivore diet and removed everything, and then I just introduced one food group at a time, and whenever I'd have a reaction to a food, I would know exactly what it was, because my diet wasn't chaotic, it wasn't all over the place. I was just having like maybe 3 food items.
It allows you to pinpoint what's going on.
Exactly.
Or, the problem foods.
Well, if you eat like a chocolate bar, like there's a laundry list of ingredients, and you have a reaction, it's like, well, what caused it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You think chocolate, but it's not just cacao and milk in there.
Yeah.
Like you'd even have to differentiate between those two. It's like
exactly
all manner of things.
So it is important to kind of go on some form of elimination diet, but like you said, you can have your cake and eat it too. You don't have to just drastically restrict all foods, and that's going to work. That's not going to work in your favor. Definitely, that's going to cause your metabolism to drop, and the carbs are essential. And to actually deal with food intolerances, you need enough energy. So the intestines needs to be energized to deal with, to one, break it down, but also to keep the tight junctions between of the lining of the gut, so prevent leaky gut. So a healthy system, one that can break down food efficiently, needs a lot of energy. And it's a bit of a catch-22, because when you're trying to get your energy up, you need to eat more, but if you're reacting to foods, it's like, well, how do I eat?
Yeah.
And so the best way to go about that is to find really basic, high-calorie foods that digest well, and slowly increase your calories over time and bring your energy up on those foods, and then start experimenting with different foods. And so for me, the first thing that I added into my diet was white rice. And it wasn't a peaty food, but I did really well with starch at the time, and I would have reactions to any type of sugar. So I'd have like
even honey.
Yeah. So
wow, because I was going to say, this is why I'm such a big advocate for honey, because everybody digests honey well. But there we go.
Well,
I was going to say honey's like the red meat of the carbohydrate world.
Well, I think to be fair, I probably had some level of fatty liver. Natural sugars and fructose just wouldn't work well for me. I'd feel really off after them. But starch worked a charm, and that's quite an anti-peak concept. So this is I'm not. What my own experience matters most to me, obviously, and obviously people are different, but the general principle still applies. You're getting a carbohydrate source to support some of the stress systems. If you digest it well and it works well for you, then keep on using it. Don't cut that out because it's not, because kind of some of the Ray Peaters or people in this sphere are kind of anti-starch, but I think it has a very important role.
Yeah, that's my point. You got to remain open with these things and not take anything as gospel, and a lot can get lost along the way. And this is something that George Furman, who we were talking about earlier, he talks about this. The idea that for some people, nailing fruit all day long isn't going to be good. It's going to overload your liver. Some people are going to be able to handle that. Other people, that was maybe the state you were in, like eating loads of having loads of fructose, like even if it's honey, loads of glucose through those methods might not be as beneficial for you as having something that on paper is going to be less easily digestible, like white rice.
Oh, definitely. It's context dependent. You really need to know what works for you. And just because something is stated as good, even in the Peat sphere, it's like, well, if you're not able to utilize it effectively and convert it into energy, then it's not working for you at this point in time. Doesn't mean you can't have it in the future. So my diet opened up. Like, I can pretty much eat everything now. I have some issues with like bananas and dates, but I still eat them. I just can't overdo them. And I think I think everyone has certain food intolerances naturally, and it's just people will just kind of will eat things without knowing that they've actually got an intolerance, and maybe have some certain reactions and not kind of put two and two together. But yeah, going back to the white rice, so like, that was very nourishing for me. I'd have the red meat and the white rice, and I'd have that 3 times a day, and that gave me enough glycogen and enough glucose to actually start running some of these metabolic processes. And then I was able to introduce things like honey, because beforehand I'd have honey and I'd have a stress reaction, and my hands and feet would go ice cold. I'd feel just really off, and it would cause wakefulness. But I remember very clearly when I first introduced a fruit. It was pineapple. It's a very low FODMAP fruit, and I had a pineapple smoothie or something just before bed, and I slept the whole night through for the first time. And I just remember waking up. I actually broke down in tears because I was so happy.
Yeah.
And because obviously I was dealing with loads of insomnia. I was like, that was like a nail in the coffin for anti-sugar. I was just realised that sugar is an anti-stress thing, and when you can digest the food and it works well, it just heals. And yeah, from then I would just slowly, gradually introduce new foods, try different things, and then I just gradually built this momentum, and then I was eating all sorts then, and I'm basically where I am now. So caffeine is improving energy metabolism. So everyone feels the energy boost from caffeine. Obviously you've got to support that with enough fuel, or you're just running on stress hormones. But caffeine or coffee is anti-serotonergic, pro-dopamine, and I think it's just the inhibition of so aspirin lowers free fatty acids, which can be a real problem for people who are in a low metabolic state. And caffeine can promote the release of free fatty acids if it's not consumed with enough fuel. It can be stressful. And so free fatty acids are basically liberated through lipolysis, and we usually have higher amounts in the blood when we're stressed. And the combination of caffeine and aspirin prevents the liberation of free fatty acids into the bloodstream. Caffeine increases the metabolic rate, and obviously aspirin too. You provide enough fuel with that, you're just like accelerating the metabolic pedal, and you will feel it. You've just got to make sure you've got enough fuel on board, and also that you don't crash, because if you have coffee without enough like fat or sugar, you'll quickly crash and burn, and you'll feel it, especially when you're using some of these other pro-metabolic interventions.
That's why the classic, we were talking about it earlier, when we had cappuccinos with loads of sugar in. We were talking about the fasted black coffee. Like that spike, man, oh, it feels amazing, but you pay for it on the back end.
Oh, 100%. And people, this is going back to, like, I want to touch on this as well. People love running on stress hormones. Like, stress is...
It feels really good.
It can feel great. A lot of people are addicts and they don't even realise it. They're running on stress hormones day in, day out. It provides the necessary energy to get work done. And like, if you're being chased by a lion, you're hyper-focused, right? And so the same physiological processes are happening, just to a lesser degree, when you're using black coffee, not using enough fuel, or fasting, or doing anything that increases your energy demands without supplying sufficient fuel. You'll have to dip into these stress systems, and you will feel good doing it. And that is I think that's the trap that a lot of these people who do like low carb, like intermittent fasting, you will feel good initially because you are running on stress hormones, and it does feel like clean energy as well. But it's at the expense of your long-term health. And like we were saying before, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have that calm, collected energy. You can be in a high energy state and also feel that focus. So Ray Peat would say, he used to call it the relaxed and ready state, one where you are relaxed and you're not like wired but tired, like a lot of these sort of interventions that increase stress do. So they may provide energy, but you're kind of jittery and you're a bit wired. The relaxed and ready state is one where you're calm and like focused, but you're ready to take action, and you can do, like, it's on the precipice of possibility. Like, you're not just overwhelmed or keeping yourself busy for the sake of it. Like, you're productive. And
that's a beautiful way to put it. On the precipice of possibility.
Yeah.
Relaxed and ready, not wired and tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's noted. That's going in the journal. In the journal, right? Yeah. While we're on caffeine, then talking about stimulants and being in this this alert state and running off stress hormones, let's talk about nicotine.
Okay.
We were talking about that earlier. It's like the classic, I don't know what you'd call it, like the entrepreneur starter pack, or like the finance bro starter pack. Black coffee, a Zin, or Zin in America, like here it's usually like Nordic Spirit or whatever, isn't it? Snus. Nicotine. Obviously, it's a really powerful compound. I was saying, from a productivity, from a cognitive performance standpoint, it's so good. I actually use it better, and I feel more sustained from it than I do on caffeine. Unless like I have like green tea, I have it with L-theanine and everything. Like caffeine, I do feel like the crash, especially on the emotional end, like towards the end of the day. Whereas like nicotine, I can hit a lot of nicotine and like just feel good and be really productive on it. But on the athletic performance side of things, I don't like it because of the vasoconstriction. So it's got its benefits. But with a lot of power comes a lot of responsibility. Let's go into the pros and cons.
So how do you take nicotine, like yourself?
Pouch,
yeah.
I mean, when I'm taking it just for like the social enhancement, it's a cig.
Yeah, I get you. Listen, I love nicotine, but it's highly addictive, and I think you can get the same benefits with other compounds. So you can be smart about, like, if you actually understand how nicotine works, you can kind of elicit a similar cognitive state and physiological state with other compounds without having the addictive tendencies. However, I do think it is neuroprotective. There's good studies on that. And if you are currently like using nicotine, like I wouldn't demonize it. Like there are ways of kind of using it in a more healthy manner. Kind of like there's that using coffee before breakfast can be overstimulating. So if you're going to use nicotine, it's a stimulant, so you kind of use it after you've got enough fuel on board. But like looking at how it increases things like cognition, so it increases acetylcholine, and there are other compounds, like we've talked about this before, like ginkgo biloba. It can be a good alternative, and that can actually suppress the need to use nicotine. It can help with nicotine addiction. It's probably because it's kind of filling in for a role.
It supports the acetylcholine receptors in your brain, doesn't it, rather than kind of abusing them in the way that nicotine does. So it can be a good long-term equivalent. But yeah, pros and cons of nicotine.
So some of the research that I've looked into as well, I think, so it can be dopaminergic, which can be good for like focus and cognition, but I think it can also be can increase prolactin in some people. So some people have prolactin spikes, which can be problematic.
Really, from nicotine?
Yeah. So I mean,
I didn't know that.
I'm not fully well informed with the research, but there's some papers that show elevated prolactin after chronic use, at least, or especially when you're using like the high dose and you're not adjusted to it, and you get these big spikes, maybe the high dose nicotine pouches. And I've kind of noticed that in myself, so I've noticed maybe what I would consider like an increase in prolactin from using some of these stronger nicotine doses. But
have you noticed that in your bloods, or is it like certain kind of symptoms that make you think that?
So more so the symptoms, like I couldn't be sure. Obviously, it would be best to get the bloods checked and like be a man of science and like actually track it or whatever. But
no, but I'm curious as to your, you've obviously got good intuition at this point. What do you like? What are the symptoms you're looking for which make you think an increase in prolactin? Because I think that's an important thing for people to be aware of, what that looks like.
So this is going to sound weird, but for me, it's like my nipples will become sensitive, obviously, because of I've had, it sounds ridiculous, but I previously had gynecomastia, and that's pretty much resolved. That happened because of the finasteride, but I still have like a predisposition to it, and I notice when my prolactin's really high, my mood will be off. I'll kind of, maybe my nipples will be a bit sensitive. I just feel like kind of like my mood is, you don't have those dopaminergic tendencies, that drive and motivation, but it's usually, I think it's like a rebound effect for like the higher dose, and so I'd kind of feel it in between. And also like the whole cognitive angle, like I think coming back to the benefits, like I think that's where nicotine kind of shines, is through the improvements in cognition.
Yeah, definitely.
But like we're saying, if you're not addicted, I wouldn't just jump in. I would maybe try some other compounds. If you're currently using it, maybe have a bit more hygiene around it. So kind of use it after meals. Use it when you've got enough fuel on board, so you're not dipping into the stress. Because obviously it is a stressor. It's to create an energy demand. And so there are also like other acetylcholine boosters that can work outside of nicotine, but acetylcholine is not something that you want like chronically elevated or in higher ranges consistently, because that's kind of involved with this learned helplessness state, and it is
really okay.
Yeah, so
I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah, it is involved in like the parasympathetic nervous system.
As in, acetylcholine promotes parasympathetic state.
Yeah, it can do. It's kind of involved with that, and so if you're chronically in like Ray Peat was against acetylcholine being like chronically elevated, and to be brutally honest, I don't know all the intricacies there, but I think the benefits outweigh the negatives with nicotine. But if you're not addicted, I wouldn't say don't get involved.
You don't want to get addicted to it for the sake of trying to get the benefits.
No, because if you become reliant on something, like you are now. Your physiology is geared towards needing that, and
psychologically as well, like you get to the point where you think, I can't sit down and do whatever work I have to do in front of the computer today because I haven't had my nicotine, I haven't had my coffee.
Yeah, and that's what I experienced with it. So I've kind of stopped using it now. Maybe I'll use the occasional pouch in like a social situation.
That's where I love it. That's my rule. I keep it for social enhancement because it feels great.
Definitely. And when you kind of rely on it, like you'll find it hard to get work done without something like that, because your cognition outside of that won't be as sharp, and you'll see the contrast. So So now you kind of need nicotine to work. It's become a bit of a problem. But like cognitive boosters, I would recommend TTFD. So this is this bioavailable thiamine that crosses the blood-brain barrier and doesn't need thiamine transporters, and it's incredibly powerful. And that increases acetylcholine to a point, but it's very dopaminergic, and it just increases brain energy. So the state that we're looking for with a lot of these cognitive enhancers is improved brain energy more than anything. And so a lot of the nootropics are just, some of them are working on stress pathways to elicit their results. Others are improving the conversion of glucose into energy, and I think they're the ones that are protective. The TTFD has been life-changing for me and a lot of other people in improving focus, cognition, and like workflow. And when I started using TTFD in the right dose and gradually increasing it, because I wouldn't just jump in at the deep end with like 100 milligrams, I recognised that I no longer needed nicotine as much, and I didn't really have cravings for caffeine, because you're receiving that brain energy. It's like you don't actually seek these other things that improve your function temporarily. You've got the brain energy to focus, and that would be a good alternative. And obviously things like ginkgo that quite closely matches what nicotine does. And there are other nootropics, but
Mucuna's getting a lot of attention recently, isn't it?
Yeah, and so that's like going to work as like a precursor to dopamine, and you can also become reliant on that. And so it's much better to drive energy metabolism as like a fundamental thing for boosting cognition, rather than just working on like a single receptor, because it's much more holistic then, and like you're having an actual shift in various different neurotransmitters and hormones with energy metabolism, rather than just isolating one like maybe mechanism. But like mucuna, how do you pronounce it?
Parens. I don't know how to pronounce it. Mucuna.
Mucuna, yeah. I've never tried it personally, but it is amazing what like a dopamine agonist can do. So something that increases dopamine, like you definitely feel it. And I think they can be fun to play around with, to see what it feels like to be in that high dopamine state.
I think that's a massive part of it. Going back to novelty, we just like experimenting with ourselves, don't we? Like altered states, like deviating from just what we know as our normal day-to-day experience of this life. Having something like as simple as a coffee, or having some nicotine, or then like trying something like mucuna or ginkgo. We like altering our state of consciousness, or definitely. I do anyway. I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to look back into history, and it's like a big part of tribes. Like they've used nicotine like since the beginning of time. Like as far back as you can look, nicotine's been like a pivotal substance. So I think these definitely have roles, and there are other benefits to nicotine. I think some of them go more towards when you smoke them in like the form of a cigar, because there's lots of other compounds that are in tobacco that are useful, and they can increase DHT and lower estrogen, and they obviously you're having the cognitive effects. So I love a cigar. Like if I want to have a deep, meaningful conversation with like one of my bros, I'll have a cigar, and like the verbal fluency is great, and you can really mull over ideas, and it's quite a nice, relaxed thing. It's not a big, sharp spike that you would get from like a nicotine pouch. So I think that's like a much safer practice. And obviously, you're not inhaling a cigar; you're kind of circulating the smoke around your gums, and the nicotine is entering through your gums, and
it's almost like a pouch in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. But it's less of an intense spike. Okay. Obviously, you can adjust the dosage with the spike and go for.
These geese, man.
Obviously, you can adjust the dose with a pouch and keep it nice and low, in like 3 milligrams.
That's geese smoking me.
Going mental.
Go on if you can. You can adjust the dosage.
Yeah. And so I actually tried one recently called Anglo Spirit. So it's a new brand. So,
Well, this is a pouch.
yeah. And it's like Kendall Mint Cake, so it's like a British guy, like obviously Anglo Spirit rather than Nordic Spirit. It's nice metal tin. Shout out Veronica, she put me onto that. And that's like a nice low dose. I think it's like 4 milligrams maybe. And that just, for me, that was the sweet spot. Like anything more than that and you kind of...
Anything more than that, and it goes from being stimulating to sedative, I find.
Yeah. And so that would be the acetylcholine, increasing the parasympathetic nervous system. But yeah, so playing around with these nootropics can be fun. But I think if you're reliant on them and they're kind of working on kind of complex pathways, I would always caution against kind of using them consistently. Nicotine, you can kind of get away with. Caffeine, these kind of work up further upstream, so they have they're less kind of specific. But things that improve brain energy is my go-to, and TTFD's done wonders for that. And so since I incorporated that, I really don't need stimulants really, and feel very focused and level-headed and good brain energy.
Awesome. Bro, we could go all day. We have gone all day. We've seen the sun go from up there to arcing behind those trees. Thank you for everything that you've shared today, man. It's been really informative. We'll have to do a part 2, whether it's same place here again next week or whether it's in Bali.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Yeah, we'll have to get together and do it again.
I'm keen for it.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.
Really appreciate you.
Yeah.